Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Oscar vs. Trevor here. I am joined by Thomas, as always, and today we are talking about The Brutalist, one of the cinematic events, I would say, of the year. One of the most talked about films of the year. It's directed by Brady Corbet. Still, I'm not 100% sure on that pronunciation. And we got Adrian Brody, we got Felicity Jones, we got Guy Pearce, Joe Alwyn's here. And this is a film that has been described as monumental, I think is the word that keeps on floating around it. And it's just very big. It's
Hmm.
just a big film, in length and scope and scale. It's a lot of movie. It's a lot of movie, and I think we feel slightly differently about it.
We do indeed, we do indeed. I was perhaps less blown away by it than you to give sort of very general thoughts. I felt that it was so it was trying so hard to achieve this sort of epic grand scale. It knew very much what it wanted to be. It is following in the vein of things like The Godfather and those sort of 70s Once Upon a Time in America, these
Hmm.
massive films. It is very much following in the footsteps of those, and I just felt at times that in being so aware of itself and trying so hard to achieve that, it sometimes loses what actually made some of those films great, like the investment in sort of characters and the story and what's going on. So yeah, those were sort of my most general takeaway from it.
Sure.
But I know that you felt very differently.
Yeah. I think, and we'll get into it. I think that that self-awareness does work because I think that the film is very much a conversation between modernism and postmodernism, which I think is one of like the most fascinating elements of it, which justifies, I think, some of that like self-awareness of its own bravado, I guess. But yeah, I absolutely love this. It is, it's very close to being my film of the year. To be honest, I was blown away on first viewing. I've since seen it twice more. Was able to see it in IMAX as well, which was incredible. Uh, it just feels so formally assured. And it was just transcendent, honestly, to see a film this formally assured at such a large scale. I think that it is very, very thematically fascinating. As I said, I think that you have these conversations between modernism, postmodernism, and metamodernism once we get to the end. And we are going to talk about spoilers. This is spoiler review,
Yep.
spoiler analysis, etc. I think that yes, on the surface, it is this portrait of the American dream and art corroding underneath of it. But I think that it through its formal execution of that text does very interesting things with uh I know with that structure that we haven't really seen before, even if there are plenty of films that explore a lot of these same ideas. It just, I don't know, I felt like it was just a visionary, like groundbreaking work for our time. I don't really think that there are films like this now, and there should be.
Yeah, it does feel, I mean, undoubtedly groundbreaking and offering a novel approach in many ways. And it doesn't feel thematically tied, even though it is easy to just sort of launch the film and go, oh, yeah, it's just a film about the American dream. Actually, it is through the sort of presentation of art, it adds something new onto that
Mhm.
sort of scope. And it's not just about a man suffering in America, coming to America with this naive sense that he's going to
Right. We, we
achieve great
we've seen
things.
those films
We've
before. Yeah.
seen those films before. It is not quite doing that, and it is adding layers on top, which is why
Right.
maybe my general thoughts actually, in retrospect, maybe came across as a bit too negative than I would actually like, because there is a lot to really engage with in this film. I thought the first half in particular, and I do think the intermission is a gimmick. I personally just wasn't really a fan of it. I felt it kind of just detracted, but I mean that is really sort of by the by. I mean, it basically, that is a sort of sign to me that they were trying so hard to do this kind of thing. I was like, did we need an intermission? No, it kind of made the film feel like two distinct halves, and I think that the first half, for me personally, was quite a bit
But
stronger.
I think that is necessary though to have it into like you could have done it in a different way than an intermission. It could have been a title card or something. But I do think that the choice for it to be in two halves is important. It's all and again, it could have just been the same thing as how you split the epilogue as well. Again, it could have just been a title card. But I think that specific structure of three parts is very necessary to the engagement with the themes.
Yeah. I mean, technically four as well, because you had the overture as well as its
Sure.
its own separate thing, which again I felt was maybe a little bit self-indulgent. But I mean, we'll get to the epilogue at the end because I think that's where me and you have really distinct differences.
Yeah.
In opinion, I will say that the film does carry itself through the 3 hours 20. It feels 3 hours 20 in a way a film like Oppenheimer didn't last year, but that is not necessarily a bad thing. It is really not trying to be economical.
I did not feel the length. Like,
I
really
did feel the length. Yeah,
really,
it
and
was
that's interesting
much more
because
along the lines of Killers.
both people that I saw it with two different people on two different viewings, and neither of them said that they felt it either. So
okay, interesting.
It makes me feel good. That's not just a me thing, but I really like. It felt like it was like an hour 45, 2 hours to me. Like I did not feel it at all. I felt like it flew by.
But it's not necessarily. It's not negative that it didn't fly by. It felt
sure.
like
no, I'm not saying that it's like a positive or negative.
Like, yeah, I think the film was meant to feel like a slog. It was meant to feel sprawling and meandering in parts. I still think it could have been slightly tightened up, especially when we're using the time to maybe not explore the relationships between characters in the way that I quite wanted. It was more the relationship between characters and the themes and the American dream and their art. That was what was really explored in this extra time. Whereas I'd rather we just got a bit more of the character relationships. I wanted to see more moments of Guy Pearce and Adrian Brody's characters, Laszlo and Harrison. One of them's called Harry.
Harrison.
One of them's called Harrison. Yeah. I get them confused. I don't know why did they name Joe Alwyn's character Harry. They could have done it differently. But anyway, I wanted to see more tension built between them. I wanted to see more tension between Felicity Jones' character and Laszlo. And I just didn't. I don't know if I quite got that into character relationships. Whereas for a 3 hour 20 film, there was time for that. There was space for that. There were opportunities to get that.
I think that this, and just us responding to this film differently, is just, as with most things, comes down in a lot of ways to the different ways that we engage with films and engage with character. In that you see characters often as the driving force in films, and I see characters as I see themes as the driving force in films, and I just think that characters are tools through which you can further explore your themes, but the themes are the central focus, not the characters. The characters are there to get you deeper into the themes, whereas I think you feel more strongly about characters.
For films like this and films like Killers of the Flower Moon, which I feel very similarly about these two films, I think Killers had more fundamental issues that this film isn't plagued by, which is why I would consider this to be an improvement on that. But yeah, I think it does become more egregious when the film is that long, when the film is doing so much, that to not quite have the characters as fleshed out, aside from Laszlo himself, I'd argue, who is the central focal point throughout the film.
I don't think that the point of the film is the characters, though.
No, but I think you need strong characters to sustain a film of this length. You need to be able to invest in the characters. You need to really care
I feel like you can. I feel like you can in its given state. I think that, Guy Pearce's character is incredibly compelling. I think maybe Felicity Jones' character is a bit underdeveloped, but that also makes sense with the thematic structure. Because really our two central focuses as far as characters, it's Laszlo and it's Harrison Van Buren, right?
Yeah.
And I think that their dynamic is very interesting and fleshed out, as is. But again, they're the film isn't about them as characters. The film is about, really, the film is about Zofia, and Zofia's reflection on them and their relationship to the themes as she's portraying them.
And for me, that could have worked if Sophia was a more active presence throughout the film.
But that's what I think.
This is why for me the epilogue didn't quite come together. It didn't piece anything together that I hadn't already taken from the film. It didn't recontextualize anything because Sophia was never a focal, but she was never the part of the story. It felt like, oh, now suddenly we realize, oh, your perspective was kind of lost in the shuffle. Now let's just bring it back at the end. And I don't know if it was for me entirely thematically coherent. And I can understand a valid argument against that point, but for me, it felt tacked on.
Well, I think that is the change in structure between Act 1 and Act 2, right? Because I think that Act 1 it is very, like, I think traditionalist in its structure, and it is something where the information that we are seeing on screen, what Corbett is exploring on screen, is what we're seeing in the letters. Because to get into spoilers, obviously the epilogue, the video has spoilers on it if you haven't, but the epilogue is at the BNL, right? And Sophia gives this like presentation speech about her about her uncle Laszlo Toth. And the film, I think, very importantly, opens and closes on Sophia. Sophia is the first thing that we see in this film, and she's the last thing that we see in this film. And the first thing that we see in this film is her silently being like challenged of her identity, and then the last thing that we see of her is kind of like falsely claiming this identity, and speaking for her uncle, who now no longer can speak. And I think in the midst of that, within that first act, that is when Laszlo has control. That is when Laszlo has control over the structure. It's when he fits into the formal ideas of the film. It is very structured. It's very, I guess, like rigid in the way that it is giving information. Everything is straightforward, and that information is coming through the letters that he is sending back to his wife and Sophia, right? And then once we get Sophia into the film, and I do think that this plays a lot better on rewatch. Rewatching the film, rewatching the film through Sophia's eyes, and rewatching the film thinking about it as being from Sophia's perspective, I think does recontextualize a lot on second viewing, because when you get into that second viewing, you see information start to be abstracted. You see the form of the film start to become more abrupt, and information being bypassed, because it is really this reconstruction, I guess, of Laszlo's life through the eyes of Sophia, and almost this embellishment of his life to fit into the ideation of the American dream, rather than anything that is natural or rigid or structured. And I think that what makes it work so well for me is that it is a formal, like, it's a marriage of form and text, really. And I think also what you have is the progression of modernism, postmodern, and metamodernism. Within the first part of the film, it's very modernist. Everything is straightforward. Within the second part, it's very postmodernist. You're now seeing his life as reflected through the perspective of somebody else. And now, formally and textually, his work is being challenged. His work is being challenged with the building, and they're bringing in all the other people, but also within the form, it is now challenging what worked for him in the first half, and what made it feel safe for him, and like a safe space for Laszlo to inhabit within the frame. And then once we get to the epilogue, now we're fully meta-modern. Now we have this like post-ironic pop song, and this complete lack of sincerity in his work, now completely transformed into something that it was not without the voice of him. And I think that structure of art, I guess, then playing back into all of the ideas of the corrosion of art throughout the film, that is what really made the entire thematic and textual structure of the film work for me.
Yeah, I mean, that is a very compelling point. And maybe this is a film that I do need to go back and rewatch. I think the problem is with a film like this is that it was slightly unsatisfactory, presenting the first sort of hour and a half as Laszlo's journey, and then to sort of that gets a bit muddled in, for me at least.
It gets stolen from him, I think.
Exactly. Sure, you could say it gets stolen, but I think when what you were replacing it with is, for me, it was a sort of more convoluted mess of perspectives rather than something that felt all that challenging or postmodern. I guess I didn't really see Laszlo's arc as being inherently more interesting when examined through the lens of Sophia. I think it was just as compelling. I think it was more compelling when we saw his story from his perspective, I would say, and that's why I did.
Sure, but I also
favor
don't think that the film is
act.
entirely about Laszlo. I guess it's the because again, I think Laszlo is kind of like he's a representation of bigger things, and the tools.
Sure,
just,
but
I
that
guess,
doesn't
for
mean
the
you
thematic.
can. But I guess yeah, and I mean this is again the difference of you treating characters more as vehicles.
Mhm.
I just because he is an exploration of more universal ideas are being instilled onto him, doesn't mean you can't gain satisfaction still from watching a man's journey unfold. And I think the tragedy of it all would have been heightened if we sort of if it sort of kept the sort of more modernist, if we're using that model for analysing the film, which I think is a very effective model for analysing the film, if we kept the modernist style throughout the whole film, I think that the sprawling epic nature of it all and the epic tragedy of it all would have come through a bit more. I would have felt the emotion towards Laszlo's
but then
decreasing health. I would have felt the tragedy towards this his work of art being corrupted more if I actually felt more about Laszlo. I mean, yes, and as all of these thematic elements you're mentioning do ring true. That doesn't change the fact that me, having watched a film, I was left somewhat unsatisfied by the conclusion it reached, I suppose.
Sure. I think that can also be a bit about expectation. And I think that you are meant to feel like it's been ripped away from you, as it's been ripped away from Laszlo. Again, both within the text, but then also within the form. Because I think that the film also deals a lot with assimilation into culture, and that's obviously discussed a lot throughout the film. I think that Attila, his cousin, at first is this very fascinating contrast where you have this all-American man who's married a American woman, converted to Catholicism, changed his accent, changed the name, right? And you have Laszlo who's resisting that, and he's constantly being pushed away from assimilation. And I think throughout the film, he's slowly being forced into assimilation, and I think that is also again something that the form reflects. I think that yes, the tragedy could be found in this modernist telling of the film, but then I also think that it feels like a more conventional epic, and I don't think that that's what Brady Corbet was trying to do. I think that Brady Corbet is trying to take the preconceptions of the structure of the American epic and kind of like lure you in with the first half before turning it on its head and making this postmodern and metamodern kind of deconstruction of it, while still holding true to like the core scope of it all. I guess it feels like it's being the thing while engaging with it at the same time.
Thinking about it, like you could suggest that my take on the film is that Brady Corbet was so successful in the first act at creating this modern thing, and actually that was part of the whole goal is to strip that away. And the assimilation point is actually a very good point that I guess I didn't entirely piece together. Yeah, there feels like a lot of pieces to this film. Yeah. It is definitely one that maybe
it's one that I've thought about a lot. I would recommend a second viewing. I think that everybody should see this film twice. I was overwhelmed, but really I was overwhelmed, but felt like it was like, just something big and special after first viewing. But it wasn't until a second viewing really that I fully, I don't know, kind of grasped everything on a more visceral level rather than it just being these like floating ideas. But it is a film that I think reveals itself. I think that it is a deceptively kind of simple film in that it feels like this very, again, traditional American epic. But
simple but complicated with, because even the first half is complicated with
but it's complex in a different way. It's complex in a different way.
It's complex in a different way potentially, and I responded, I guess, to that complexity better than what I think he was trying to do with the whole metamon stuff towards the end of
which I think is fair. I think speaking on tragedy, like again, because you could have that very modernist take on the tragedy, but I think that the tragedy really is like it comes through Sophia and how this like intricately constructed structure of part one has just been obliterated by Sophia's like completely contrived embellishment of the American dream, and it's the bluntness and the lack of nuance is the tragedy of it all, because that is that like it has become everything that Laszlo hated. And I think that the final line is really the key, that it's the destination, not the journey, because it's just not true. We've watched this entire film about the journey, and now in the final 5 minutes, we have Sophia, who is trying to, repackage this man's entire life and his entire life work, whose biggest accomplishment is now blemished with the man who abused him, and put it into this nice digestible package that is supposed to represent what the American dream is supposed to be, and say it's about this. It is about what I'm showing you right here. This is the destination, this 5 minute, digestible package, and this is what everybody should strive to. And it is this like, and then the pop song playing afterwards, it is just this like kind of painfully ironic slap in the face after we spent 3.5 hours watching the journey, to be told, actually, no, you're being forcefully assimilated into American culture. Fuck you. It's the destination. And that for me, especially on second viewing, is what really sold me on the way that Corbett plays with structure in this film. I think that turn almost, and especially contrasting that being her last words with the silent opening sequence, as she's kind of accepted this, this ideation in Laszlo's last, like against Laszlo's kind of last silent resistance, where he just has to sit there and watch him being taken in by this ideal. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's really incredible.
The final line, yes, I think is the important aspect. And I guess I would just suggest that the idea that the sort of overall thesis of the film is it is about this journey, and it's not about the destination in a way. And so it's this reversal of what Sophia says. And what I would just say is that the journey itself is not quite as compelling as maybe I would like it to be for that point at the end, to really bring home, for that irony to really come and land in a way. But I do think I think you meant, the pop song, just a contradiction, even this little thing. And this is what I'm saying. Brady Corbet is a very intelligent filmmaker, and there is visionary ideas in here. And just, I didn't find it all that satisfying. There was a lot to find, and just that contradiction between the pop song and the score, this like epic booming score that plays throughout the film, to contrast with that was a real powerful moment. There's a lot of powerful filmmaking.
The credits going diagonally across the screen against the credits yes. And the opening credits being the slow scroll like sideways across the screen.
I mean, there's a reason it's a trailer shot and the poster shot even as well, but the Statue of Liberty,
the upside down.
That is a immediate one of those kind of shots that just linger in your brain and stay, and is like a motif throughout the entire film. Even though it's not repeated at any point in time, it doesn't become a visual motif. It is still constantly ringing.
It becomes a thematic emblem of everything else. Exactly. For the
so there was a lot of very intelligent visual metaphors going on that I think Brady Corbet is able to very easily find. Like, Brady Corbet is able to, beyond just directing brilliant performances, which we haven't really touched on, but I mean, Adrien Brody wouldn't be my pick, but is an astonishing performance and one of the best performances I've seen from him. Guy Pearce arguably might be my pick as the best supporting performance of the year. In the same way Robert De Niro was my favorite performance in Killers. Guy Pearce is the one. It's the standout for me here.
I mean, he's incredible.
Exactly. I think it's just, there's something so compelling about watching him on screen. Even the little moments where he's in the taxi going, "Yes, I've got 10,000 bottles of Madeira, and that's why I'm now interested in architecture, because I've run out of like." It's just, there's something so charming's the wrong word. Charismatic. There's something so charismatic about his screen presence in this film that I really appreciate. And
their conversations,
was a little overshadowed. It's amazing.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. I would say their conversations, they're intellectually stimulating conversations. I think are really, really interesting and serve in a lot of ways as microcosms for much of what the film does. I mean, there's so much that we could get. Like there's the rape scene. There's what is,
which, but I mean, that's one of those examples of something I would have liked to have seen unpack slightly more. And
Sure. That's
I
probably leaning into
understand
the idea of it being embellishment of
I
like
understand
Vivian's
he
embellishment.
didn't because it's but when you're trying to get to the destination of this was actually Sophia's story, just that it was her perspective. When we didn't see that, it's like,
Sure.
but really, was that what you were trying to do the whole time? I'm not quite sure. So I guess
Sure.
that was just
I
another
think
element
the
of that.
idea would be that her only reading of that moment would be from the perspective of Laszlo's wife, right?
Okay.
Of Lacey Jones. Um, and you have Harrison's. I think it's alluding to his suicide. I think in that final sequence.
Yeah, no,
Um,
that whole ambiguity I appreciated, and I
yeah,
liked that we never quite found out what happened to him. We never, because there is no one response to the American dream. There is no one
yeah.
answer. It's, oh, this is the destination you arrive at, which again is leaning into the ideas that
It leads in. Yeah,
Sophia's confident assertion that it is all about the destination is
yeah.
just wrong, and it's not what the film is trying to do. And then
Mhm.
that idea that we never know Harrison's destination, we never know what happens to him. I did appreciate as an
Yeah.
element, and did think that the way that part of the story was wrapped up and concluded, just him literally lost in this art that he was weirdly interested in, like the fact that he's literally been lost in it. I think is so
Yeah.
a powerful note to end on, I suppose.
100%. 100%. Um, and yeah, I think that their conversations. I keep on thinking about the one where they talk about the cube. Which I think is again serves very much as a microcosm. I mean, obviously you can read like the Van Buren household as a microcosm for America and American power structures and Lazo existing within it, and then trying to build his own thing outside of that, and that being constantly stripped from him. And again, this idea of the American dream being you coming over doing work and then it being ripped from you in the name of an American, businessman being slapped on the front of it and you not taking anything, right? There's all of that. But
I
I
mean,
think
the
that
great
idea
shot
of
of
the
him
cube.
digging the ground. It's
Oh yeah,
so
smiling in the
cheesy.
camera.
It's so
Yeah,
silly. Yeah,
it's
exactly.
so
It's
tongue in
so
cheek.
yeah.
But that conversation where they're talking about the Cuban, he asks him like why architecture. I think, and Laszlo responds saying, I believe the line is, "There's like what is a cube, but the materials of its construction or something like that."
There's no better description of a cube
Of a
than
cube
its construction.
than that
Yeah.
of its construction or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that is almost kind of commenting on the structure of the film itself in a way. In that it is just a stripped down look at the pieces, and we keep on talking about pieces with this film. It is a lot of puzzle pieces that are being put together, and I think that I don't know the way that it uses architecture as kind of this lens to then reflect back and examine its own self with its structure, and the way that Laszlo treats architecture versus the way that everybody tries to push and pull at his ideas and take it from him. Again, I think you
I would
see it
have
reflected in form.
Yes, yeah. I would have potentially like just a bit more of Laszlo's, like a bit more reasoning as to Laszlo's undeniable love of architecture. I never, like, you get the connection,
Sure.
but he just seems a bit like, why brutalism? Why was that what he became obsessed about? Why was that his
Sure.
architectural style? I don't think we ever got a clear connection drawn between the architecture Laszlo is creating and architecture and Laszlo the character in itself, which when you are focusing so heavily on the architecture he is creating, I think that is a slight disconnect, and is why the ending, therefore, as providing an explanation for Laszlo's love of this style of architecture, comes as slightly strange, because you obviously want to disregard a lot of what it's saying, because rightly so, the epilogue is about this disregarding of Laszlo's life and his art in a way, but we never are given any other reason as to why it was brutalism and Laszlo as opposed
Sure.
to anything else, I think.
Sure. That's fair. I think that it is interesting though that throughout really the first two parts of that film, the only place that we see Laszlo having like ownership of his own art is in pictures from magazines provided to him from Van Buren. And that they just only exist within this like boxed away little frame that can only be provided to him by, again, this man. And I think, again, not painting him as like, oh, he's this immigrant, because again these stories so much are this, oh, it's this immigrant with absolutely nothing who builds himself up. And again, I think that there's a bit of a tragedy in that, like, he was established. He was fantastic at
Yeah,
his job, and that was all taken away from him due to the war. And then
yeah,
now he's forced to, even though he's, one of the most talented architects in the world, as we're led to believe, he just now has absolutely nothing.
yeah.
And it
And the
is and
idea
it
that
is
it's
rebuilding back
yeah,
up to this shadow, I guess, that he's trying to chase
and the
of
idea
what
that
he
a
had
lot of the
before.
tragedy comes from the fact that the only way he can do that is by accepting that with others. It's not very difficult, weirdly, for him to become successful again. It
Mhm.
feels, but it's only
It's
because he is assimilating with this American dream. He
mhm.
is assimilating into American culture before he even registers that is what he is doing, and that is where a lot of the tragedy, I
Right.
think, as
And,
well
and I think
comes from.
And I think rather than seeing that internal struggle within the character, as far as him wrestling with whether he wants to assimilate and give in and just take this, or try and hold on to, this past self of, the shadow of himself that he used to have. I think that we almost see that expressed again through the form and through the architecture itself, and we see this battle almost play out in a more visceral sense, um, which I think is a really, really interesting way to explore that very real, I think, internal battle that a lot of immigrants face then and still face now. Um, I don't know. I I I really appreciate films that deal with emotions and like try to capture the viscera of emotion rather than telling the audience this is the emotion and now we're exploring it. With this dialogue scene with the character or something like that. It's trying to formally put you in the headspace, and I think what just with the film as a whole, what Corbett is doing to place us really in the mind of Laszlo and then take us out of the mind of Laszlo. I think that it is really, really impressive and deft work from Corbett. That like it's obviously visually impressive in like this monumental thing on the surface, but I think that he does so much under the surface to make all of these pieces fit, at least for me.
Yeah. But again, and that just comes down to the different ways that we approach film, whereas
Yeah,
that kind of formal stuff only really, for me at least, works to aid a film in its construction. Whereas for you, it's it's that, and then characters are vehicles,
yeah,
and the plot is his vehicle to bolster these elements of film form at their fundamental
for
level.
sure.
So, and that's just a different approach, which is why people have had different reactions to it. People
Mhm.
are similar to me. People are very similar to you as well. Like there are some regarding this as the best film of the year. There are some who are slightly underwhelmed, and they're all of the reactions to this are valid. I think it's an
Yeah,
important thing
100%.
to note
Yeah,
that yes,
yeah.
you can't
I
be
would.
objectively right about a film like The Brutalist, and when it is so challenging and when it is doing so much, it is very
Mhm.
hard to
Again, how
because
we
he's catering to a certain audience. He is,
right.
and he knows exactly the audience he's catering to, and it has clearly worked impeccably well for you. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, and that's the thing with just film in general, right? It all comes down to how we have personally grown to think about film, and then also just how our brains are wired. And it's really nothing
mm,
more than that. There's no correct or incorrect opinion on film.
yeah,
It's just how our brains are, and I think that's can honestly be as
absolutely.
interesting to explore as the
Yeah.
film itself is. Just explore kind of internally why your brain connected and didn't connect to something, and I think that you can learn more about the film almost through that way.
Which is
Um,
why we like to do film reviews. I guess
Yay! Oh my
both
God! So
loses from that.
are we being meta
Whoa,
now about doing a
it's
review?
oh
Whoa!
god, whoa.
uh, but
Yeah,
yeah. So, anyways, I think that's pretty much all we have on the Brutalist.
yeah.
I would recommend to everybody, if you can see this film twice, see it twice. I think that it does play better on second viewing. At least it did for me.
Mm.
And then a subsequent third. Uh,
Yeah,
but it's obviously a very long commitment of a film. So
exactly. And that is, yeah, kind of my thing sometimes. If you are like a film like Zone of Interest, which is very haunting to rewatch, is one that is you can rewatch it with less commitment. Whereas something like this that demands multiple rewatches to
mhm.
really fully work,
Dig deep into
sometimes
this,
that's
yeah.
just quite as possible as you'd like. So, I do think there is a beauty of something being so viscerally marvelous on just a first watch within itself. But
sure.
that's a sort of conversation between the two.
For sure. What are we feeling on a rating for this one?
I mean, I was coming in thinking 7, but a lot of the points you raised about formal elements and the way it made me think twice, and potentially it is a lot more well constructed. Like it does have a cohesion to it. So I will throw it an 8. I will throw it an 8. I do think there is so much to admire, and just a few things are slightly holding it back from ever being something that will completely blow me over and be something that is the best of the year or whatever. So I'll be throwing it an 8.
Okay. I am like at as close as I can get to 10. I'm not quite at a 10 yet, but I am at like a very, very strong 9.
I would just throw it a 10. It will end up being a 10. So did
Sure.
we think Nickel Boys a 10, and Nickel Boys was a worthy 10. So I don't know if you would actually. So
yeah, I need to. I still have only seen Nickel Boys once. I want to rewatch it before I throw it a 10.
yeah,
I'm still at a 9 with Nickel Boys, but like that's also up there. I'll give Brutalist a 10. It's there for me. I think I don't know. Really just the more I've sat with and engaged with this film, I just keep on finding more and more to really love about it. So yeah. Oh, one last little footnote on this. I've seen some people try and say that this film is Zionist, which I don't think it is. I just wanted to throw this out here at the end. I did not read it as Zionist at all. I think that you can maybe see that in the text when it talks about like the Israeli the state of Israel being necessary at the time and everything like that. But really, I think what it's saying,
commenting on the political climate of today, really.
yeah,
It is.
yeah.
So I wouldn't draw.
Well, I think you can also read a criticism of Zionism in here because it's like, especially in the epilogue, you have Laszlo who rejected Israel when he had a voice and did not want to go over there and wanted to stay in America and everything. And then you have his niece Sylvia, who is a very proud Zionist, and you can read that as Zionism almost being a tool in the American capitalist exploitation of Laszlo. And that it being after like and that you could say is a stretch, but I think that is even way more of a reasonable reading of it than the film being pro-Zionist.
Exactly. Yeah, and the film is dealing with conversations from the 50s in which Zionism was a topic that there were positives to a Zionist movement. Obviously, in today's political climate, where that has resulted, we're not getting into all of this kind of stuff.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to touch on it. I mean, also like
the film, basically, the way I read it was that it was commenting on the conversations at the time and the ways they affected Laszlo Sevilla at the time. It's not providing any meaningful stance as to the role of Zionism in today's political climate.
Yeah, and I think that again, it's looking at perspective in the same way that like Licorice Pizza is about an overage underage relationship. It's not like Paul Thomas Anderson, by showing that in a film, is saying this is a good thing, guys. I think Brady Corbet is exploring this through the perspective of these characters. I mean, also like when he won a Best Director prize at I think New York Film Critics, he spent his speech saying how they needed to pick up no other land for distribution. Guy Pearce has been one of the most like outwardly spoken pro-Palestinian actors over the last year. Like, I don't know. Some people read it as that. I do not see that.
I think it is a slightly. I think reading it exclusively in that lens is slightly reductionist and removing.
Yes,
actually, because it's not what the film was exploring. The film was exploring other stuff and it's just in the context of that time, and therefore these debates have to impact the characters, and they do impact the characters, but they're not the sole drivers of the film. So therefore,
100%.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Anyways, we don't need to go further. I wanted to make a note of that during the review and I forgot.
Also, AI, the whole debates can fuck right off.
Yeah, AI, fuck you. They did a
on
Yeah.
the controversy.
I'm gonna link Dan Merle's video.
Yeah. It's not
here.
what you think it is. They aren't, the
They
statute
did
of
it to
limitations
touch up
wasn't
voices.
AI. Exactly. It wasn't
Right.
It's not an AI film by any stretch of the imagination.
Yes.
They're using
They touched up voices, which is something that you
techniques.
it's something that you can do like just through like analog, right, like through non-AI tools. It was that because of the time constraints they just used AI. And like when you hear from industry professionals, most films are doing this shit. It is just that The Brutalist was unlucky enough to have it talked about during an award season.
Yeah.
That's so no. Fuck off with all that. It's not a thing at all.
Yeah.
So anyways, now that we've had our two little footnotes at the end, yeah, I really, really loved it. I mean, when we do our top 10 of the year, I'll definitely be talking about it again. Very, very high on the list. And yeah, no, it's a film that I'll probably rewatch a few more times over the next couple of years. Probably end up writing something very, very long on Letterboxd. I really, really loved it. So I think that's it. We went for about 42 minutes on Brutalist. One of our longer reviews, I think. But thank you, everybody. Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna make
never film that long, you got to talk about
3.5 hours. The least we can do is give a TV episode's length of a review. So, anyways, those are our thoughts on The Brutalist. Watch this one if you haven't already, and for some reason watch the entire spoiler review. Yeah. But until next time, thank you everybody for watching. Stay safe and goodbye.